Tell us the story of building cathedrals.
The Story of Building Cathedrals. That's the title of the book, and it came out of a illustration that I read years ago, and I have tied that illustration to helping urban youth leaders understand how to think about urban youth. I've met many urban youth leaders, and often I'll ask the question, when you look at urban youth, what do you see? And many times they accent what they see are the problems. They see all of the issues, all the turmoil, the violence and the effects of growing up urban. They see all of that, all the complexity of that, dysfunctional family and just the poverty, all those things they see. And so then I share with them, and it's there, it's real. But then I share with them the story. And it's the story of a contractor, a foreman, that is visiting the work site. And he's talking to different workers. He approaches the first worker and says, "What are you doing?" And he replies, "I'm breaking rocks." So then it's okay. So then he moves on to the next person and says, "What are you doing?" And he replies, "I'm making a living for my family." So then he moves along and approaches a third worker and says, "What are you doing?" And this worker, with a twinkle in his eyes, says, "I'm building a cathedral." So then I pose the question again to the urban youth worker. When you look at youth, what do you see? Do you see rocks? Do you see employment? Or do you see cathedrals in the making? And then I follow that up with a second question. Which do you suppose God wants you to see? And so the whole thrust of transformational discipleship is starting with seeing what God sees and responding accordingly. We tend to look at the problems and get so mesmerized with the problems that we forget that there are some God-given solutions that only the church can bring to the urban centers.
What does youth ministry look like that's just looking at youth and working with them as rocks?
Well, I would say probably it would be you respond to needs. It's based on the need. So you look at the problem and you're trying to solve the problem. But the problem is, say if a kid is struggling in school, then you provide tutoring, you provide some education for them. If they have a struggling home life, then maybe you're concerned about providing relief for them. So you may take them out. You may take them to camp or to a retreat or do something fun with them. You may come in for a day or for an evening and do something fun with them. But it's all based around the needs that you see. And our vision for their possibilities tends to be limited by and governed by the problem. So in a sense, you're dealing with rocks, and that's how you see them, as rocks, and so you respond accordingly.
Why are those insufficient? A need-based philosophy.
Because that is not seeing them for who they are. It's seeing an expression of what's going on in their lives, how they're responding to the struggles that are the inner city, but it's not addressing who they are, and it's not addressing their felt need. You're dealing with surface stuff, but you're not really dealing with who the person really is.
So if we just do needs-based, rock-based youth work, where does that leave our young people eventually?
Gosh, I don't know. I mean, it could lead them in all sorts of places, but it doesn't take them where they're supposed to be. It doesn't reflect who they are, why they were created in the first place, where is God in the equation, and how does God want us to work with these young people who are created in His image. We tend to get snowed by all the problems, and we don't realize it's kind of like a magician. You know, the magician gets you looking in one direction where you're not looking somewhere else. And I think that's what the urban community tends to do for the average youth worker. You get so overwhelmed by the problems that you're not looking at the solutions. And your structure, how you work with kids, is such that it doesn't really get at the heart of the need. We don't touch the need, really. I mean, we touch it in the sense that maybe we get them out of their problems for a while, maybe we even get them out of the city. But that doesn't necessarily deal with the issues, especially with what youth and adolescents need during that time of their lives.
When you actually sit across from a young person and see them as a cathedral, how are you looking at them? What are you seeing?
It's the ability to see potential. It's the ability to see beyond what is being displayed to what really is their internal motivation. Who are they? And that's the great question of the adolescent, is who am I? Why do I exist? What is my purpose? I think if that is a God thing, if adolescence is a stage of life that is a part of the God's design for human development, then that should influence how urban youth leaders work with kids. It should influence the structures of what we're doing. And so most youth leaders focus on either a lot of fun, or maybe they're really driven by, I really want to see these kids saved. Okay? And salvation is important. It's very important. But that should not be the focus. That should be happening within a larger context of creating an environment in which youth can discover who they are in Christ.
What harm is done to the urban young person when it seems as though Christian youth ministry is just myopically focused on the conversion moment, but almost unconcerned with the discipleship aspect?
You know, I've been in many youth meetings where the leader is talking to a group of kids. And you would never know, the scriptures say that, Jesus is acquainted with our grief. You would never know from those presentations that Jesus was acquainted with their grief. I think if I look at the Christians that are in the room, the adult Christians, maybe the pastor or the other youth workers, and they're listening to the youth leader talk to the kids, they're all applauding because it all makes sense to them. They agree. They're saying yay and amen. But to the young person who has heard the same language over and over again that is detached from their felt need, it amounts to coercion and abuse. From the kid's vantage point. Okay, I don't mean to say that what the youth worker is attempting to do isn't important, but because of what they are saying and the way they are saying it, they are not tying it to the felt need of the person. Jesus excelled at that. When he spoke to there are times when he didn't answer the question that was uttered. He answered the real question that was inside of that person. He did that. And that is something that we are called to understand. Jesus was divine, but he also expects us to discern. And I think it requires a different kind of training than just being able to spout platitudes to kids. That isn't enough.
When a young person is sitting there getting instruction from a youth leader, and they feel coerced or abused, what's the end of that road in relationship to their faith?
Well, there's no communication. Jesus has not spoken to their felt need. And you have not, as a youth leader, have not rightly represented Jesus to the kid. It's about speaking with authority. The disciples, when Jesus finished the Sermon on the Mount, the people responded that they marveled at Jesus because he spoke with authority and not like the scribes and the Pharisees. Jesus also talked about how the scribes and Pharisees would exercise authority over them. Two different words. When Jesus was talking about the Pharisees, he was talking about that kind of authority was abusive. But when this people talked about Jesus speaking with authority, he spoke with strength, with power, with that this is for real. At the heart of authority, I've thought about this a lot. At the heart of authority, the word within authority is the word author. The youth worker needs to rightly represent the views and the ideas of the author. Jesus spoke with authority because he was the author of what he was saying. And we speak with authority when we rightly represent him to kids. So the youth leader has a responsibility. They got to know Jesus. And they got to know what Jesus thinks about a specific issue or topic that you're talking about. And it cannot be simply just God talk or a bumper sticker. It has to be beyond that. You have to be able to know what Jesus thinks and why, because he always tells you both. He tells you both the what and the why. And it's a responsibility of the leader to understand that so it can be explained to the young person in terms that they understand. So when you do that, then you are bringing Jesus to their felt need. Jesus is now addressing their question. Okay? Francis Schaeffer had a phrase, we need to give honest answers to honest questions. That dynamic is needed, especially at the early adolescent and adolescent age. There has to be a place where there can be open, honest dialogue, with the leader being comfortable knowing that Jesus has an answer to all those questions, but they're not pat answers. They're ideas, and they're ideas that the leader has already embraced, and that the leader can then share in terms the kid would understand.
You've mentioned the word structure.
Yeah.
You thought if we think of young people as cathedrals and that we're building cathedrals as youth workers, practically speaking, what would that structure, how would that structure look like as opposed to traditional youth ministry? And compare and contrast it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that when the beauty of transformational discipleship is that it works best within the context of a church or a ministry that is committed from, churches work with people from cradle to grave. And so this is a model where you're working with your later childhood, early adolescent, and adolescent youth. And so practically speaking, so let me finish this. The idea is that when kids get to the adolescent level, they learn by doing. They become apprentices, and they do that in the context of working with the elementary kids, running the elementary program. And
as opposed to what?
Well, most youth programs are based on they're kind of age related, and you have your elementary kids here, you have your middle school kids here, you have your high school kids here, and they're all focused on that age group. And the idea is to reach them, have fun with them, be with them, and I think all that's that's yeah, it's run by youth staff. That's all important. But there's no room there's no room in that context for a young person to exercise leadership. Really, we don't allow for that. We have, I think one of the assumptions is that youth are in one place, and then they go through a period of time where they become adults, and now they're one of us. Okay, but really, they're supposed to be one of us. So youth, they just kind of go through it. Hopefully, we try to help them survive youth. And that's, so we babysit them, we encourage them, we nurture them, but the hope is that they will survive their adolescence and reach adulthood with a minimum amount of pain. And so because of that, there really is we don't see youth as leaders or having the capacity to lead. And yet, Well, yeah, they're rocks. I guess, I don't know. It's just the way. I think it's just the way we've always thought. I think youth ministry, particularly urban youth ministry, is a very unexamined work. We really haven't thought very much about it. The leader comes in, usually a very charismatic individual that can wow the kids and take them on fun things and preach at them. And they preach at them because that's what they get in church. The youth leader does with the kids exactly what they get on Sunday morning. They are preached at. And so that's what they do. And so they figure, I got a message and I'm going to tell it to them. Okay? Now, they haven't thought about their audience or haven't thought about connecting God's ideas to them. They're just telling them, this is what you need to know, so tell them what they need to know, and then you've done your job. Well, if that's not answering their question, if we're not scratching where they're itching, then what we're communicating is that Jesus doesn't scratch where we itch.
So what happens to a young person in the urban environment when you actually don't postpone leadership opportunities, but you actually give it to them early on and kind of stand back and let them do it?
Well, again, I think that by creating, there are two pieces to transformational discipleship and the development of youth that are key. One is that middle school years, the early adolescence. It's in those meetings where kids learn how to think. Okay, they learn, it's during those 2 or 3 years where week after week you're bringing up topics and subjects. You're creating an environment where there can be absolute honesty, no God talk, no bumper sticker, nothing like that. Anybody tries that, you challenge them. They say, oh, it's about faith. What is faith? Yeah, you say, oh, it's about redemption. What do you mean by that? You want them to break it down to where they're understanding what they're saying, and also they're being honest. They need to be very, very honest, because what you want to do is get them thinking and recognizing that God does have answers. And so you're always asking the question, where is God in all this? But that is a period of time where you are creating a culture where the kids they're thinking. They're not afraid to challenge. They're not afraid to really think and express their thoughts. Then as they move into the high school years, we invite them to become a part of an Emerging Leaders Initiative. Because they've already done this thinking, when they get to high school, then they can learn by doing. That's the apprentice side. And that's how Jesus discipled. He discipled through apprenticing. That's what discipleship is. And so you put them in a position where they have a meaningful responsibility. And in the urban setting, a very meaningful responsibility is to run the elementary program. And practically speaking, that would look like during the school year, you'd have a handful or a cohort of maybe 4 or 5 high school students that would be working with a group of elementary kids. That could be a large group, could be like 30, 40 kids, elementary kids. And again, you do all the stuff that elementary kids do, but there is a time where you're leading them in a discussion. At their level, you're doing that. But this way, they are learning by doing.
So what happens in you call it transformational discipleship, what happens with those 4 high schoolers that you think is more powerful than going to youth group and getting preached at and walking out the back door?
I remember one time, Sky, one of the emerging leaders, shared with me that she was walking down the street with a friend, and this friend was swearing up a storm. And then she noticed that approaching them was one of the kids in her program. And she stopped and turned to her friend and said, "Look, you have to stop swearing, because I can't be seen with someone like you, because this kid that's approaching us is a part of my group, and I'm the leader. And if you're going to talk this way, then I need to walk away from you, because I don't want to mess up my influence with this kid." There was another incident where one of our leaders was running a summer day camp. See what they do during the school year for a couple hours a week? They do 40 hours a week for 4 weeks straight during the summer. During the summer, we would have college interns come in, and but they would assist our high school leaders. This one college intern was a education major, elementary education major. So she comes in and she's sitting in this class, and she's kind of saying, "Well, I think you should do it this way, do it that way." And finally, the emerging leader looked at her and said, "Look, I got this. I got this." When you take leaders through a year of, first of all, leading the elementary program, and by doing that, that means that each person takes turn being the leader. The teacher is the leader. They're the ones that plan the meeting. They instruct everyone else on what to do. They go through the meeting, and then afterwards they debrief. They do that through the whole year. In January, they come together as a team, and they develop the summer program. They select the topics. They design it. They put it all together. They spend 4 months working on their curriculum, okay? Because they must know it cold, because we will not allow any helicopter moms or anyone that's going to save them in that classroom. There'll be someone in there to help them. There'll be someone in there sitting there minding their own business. If the leader needs something from them, then the adult will go get it. If there's a problem with a child, then all the leader has to do is just point to the child, point to the leader will take them out. So the class goes on. But the one thing the leader will not do is save them. If they mess up, if they're not prepared for that class, the kids could rise up and tar and feather them, and no one will save them. Okay?
What do you do by doing that?
Consequences. They get the consequences. The most important thing they have to do is be prepared in the classroom for the time the first kid walks in the door, the time the last kid leaves. That's just a half-hour class. We have it structured that way. So they don't get tarred and feathered for too long. And there's another day. They after they're done, we can talk about it and figure out what they did wrong, and maybe go home and do a little extra preparation, and then be prepared.
So when you take young people through this process, especially on the high school leadership side, and you come out, what do you see? In some sense, you got to see a cathedral, right? What are you seeing?
We see the elements of the cathedral. We see a sense of who they are, of why God made them, they are interacting with God about where He is, who He, how do you handle situations. It's interesting when you set this program up in this way. When you get to the summer, the work happens the 4 months before. When you get to the program, it's time to play. And so at that point in time, a lot of programs have all these issues that come up. You've got all these discipline issues and problems and people are yelling and stuff. If you set this up and prepare like this, something different happens. In our staff meetings in the morning, our emerging leaders would talk about problems that came up. Kids would begin to confide in them. They said, what do I do about this? I think there might be abuse in the home, or this kid is having struggles here. The conversation has been elevated, and now leadership is important. And what they do is important, and they know it. So if you take them through a year where they're teaching weekly, design the summer program, running the summer program, and then there's one more piece, and that is where they take it on the road. They take their skills to another city, either another city in the States or overseas. You complain you have no shoes, till you meet someone who has no feet. And so to take it to someplace else and utilize those skills there, I've seen kids go through a year of that. They go through a year. They have a sense of who they are, why they exist, and where God might be taking them. And that's how the church should be serving adolescents. That's how we serve them. That's what we give them, is a sense of where they're going. Transformation in the heart of the city, where youth grow in faith and confidence to serve others, starting with the children of their neighborhood, reaching as far as God's purpose for their lives takes them. That's the vision. If you're doing that, that's what you're supposed to be doing. And so that's what makes sense to me.
That's cool. Part of your time here is going to be taking fellows. These are 20 young 30-somethings.
Yes.
And you're going to now be taking your philosophy codified in your book.
Yes.
And teaching them. What excites you about that? I mean, this fall you're going to have dozens of hours with them to shape this thinking in them. Why is that energizing for you at this stage in your life?
Well, I just think we have a whole new generation. We have just a whole new generation of leaders, and young and excited. I think they see how past generations have not done this very well. I think they're open to new ideas. I think that there are a lot of things about this next generation that I'm very, very excited about. And so I'm excited about influencing the next generation of leaders.
And then, fundamentally, you're the coach, the consultant,
Yeah.
to help to shape the fellows as leaders to take this philosophy and then put it on the street back in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Where you worked for 30 years. So when you start thinking about that, and if you were to paint the best canvas in 36 months, in 3 years, what would this look like in a neighborhood, you think, like at its full potential, resourced well? What impact
Wow.
would it have?
I would love to see not only Providence, but other churches in the community serving youth that live around in their neighborhoods. And I would love to see pockets of transformational discipleship going on throughout the city. I think that would have a real impact on our youth. I mean, just ours was a small ministry, and yet even there, we would have a secondary influence on gang members those that were already just totally thrown into it. They would want their younger brothers or sisters to be involved in neighborhood ministries. They wanted them there because they knew they did not want them to follow in their footsteps. If we had this, I really think we could shape. We're not going to fundamentally change things by trying to work with people that are already crossed over. Okay, I think that, I mean, don't get me wrong, that ministry is important and we need to serve them. But if we're going to make a fundamental transformative change among youth, it must happen in our communities. It must happen among, as believers, our salt and light, and how we do that. And I think we can influence this next generation of young people as the next generation of leaders work with them in a different way. We give them other tools, that there are other ways to work with kids other than bringing them together, feeding them, preaching at them, sending them home, and surviving the experience, which happens so often. No, there's a better way to do this, and it's a way that is, it's a way that's been proven. This is not rocket science. It has been proven in other arenas. It just hasn't been brought to the urban community, and I think we need to do that.
What happens to a kid from the neighborhood when he's being led by a 9th grade kid from the neighborhood?
Yeah. I would have kids come during a summer program. I'd have elementary kids come to my office, and they would say, can I do what he or she, the emerging leader, is doing someday? I said, sure you can. See, I think for an elementary kid, they look around, and what do they see? And the younger you are, the more honest you are with what you see. And they see their options. I mean, I had a five-year-old once ask me, do I have to be black? It's better to be white. I mean, they see it. They see it. It's just raw. It's right there. They haven't learned to cover it up yet. So what happens is they look at their options as for what life will be like. They may look inside their home and see some of the turmoil that might be there, or they look outside their home. I mean, where your building is, when I bought that building, there was open sex, okay, tricks for money happening in the park across the street. Okay, the building itself, when we walked through the building, there was all kinds of drug paraphernalia. I mean, that was the black hole. That was the gang. That was the gang area with its own underground economy going on. What was I answering? John
Kids
Perkins.
with options.
John Perkins says this a lot. Oh, okay, okay. With kids with options, the point is that they look around and see they only have so many options. Well, when you establish a community-based ministry that is set up as a transformational discipleship ministry, you now create options for kids. They're now looking and seeing there's something else I can do, because here you have a person who is leading and they're only a few years older in age. So we developed another phrase, potential and hope ignite, when children see, modeled in youth from their neighborhood, possibilities for their own lives. So in a sense, the high school emerging leader can do something that the adult cannot do. They can give credibility to something very positive. Okay, the adult can tell them these things, and certainly adults are role models. But when they see transformation taking place in a high school student that's only a few years older than them, they're saying, that can be me. That could be me in just a few years. That's very powerful.
Yeah, how valuable is hope in the urban young?
Oh, well, yeah, well, how valuable is it? I mean, how valuable is hope to hopelessness? I mean, it is huge. I mean, that was the question that John Perkins asked me years ago. How do we build incentive in our young people? Where does incentive come from for a person that has no hope? Well, that it comes when the evidence is sitting right in front of you. I mean, for me, it was my guy who led me to Christ, who said, "There's nothing you see in me that you cannot become." I think it's in the elementary kid when they look at this high school student that is a credible leader in their neighborhood. They are neighbors, and they're saying, "Wow, I actually could do what this person is doing." It's very powerful. You asked the question, what would a fellow get out of this? And again, they would be observing the development of this ministry, including the growth and the workings of the emerging leaders as they served the elementary kids. I think one thing they would get out of this is that there is a better way to do urban youth ministry. That it is not the helter-skelter, zoom in, big splash, leave again type of thing that they may have been exposed to. What is my motivation to do this? Oh boy. I'm a cathedral builder. I think that's how God has designed me to do. That's what He's designed me to do. And I think to be able to influence, to reshape what happens with urban youth, I think would be a great contribution, kingdom contribution. And I feel like that's where God has positioned me, is to make an influence, be an influence, and to make a difference in that area. The things I learned through 30 years here in Denver, I think are things that could benefit people in other cities across the country and even in urban centers around the world. And it really excites me if I could begin that process, if I can get people focused on making a difference in this area. I think it would make a great contribution to God's greater kingdom work.